Hello everybody, good afternoon. My name is Ron Anastasio and I'm a senior sales engineer with Nitel. I handle the South region, which is where obviously you guys know Mohammed Reza over there. He is your channel manager, so I help support him. I've been with Nitel for about 6 years. So what we'll be discussing today is Nitel's SD-WAN services, where we actually have 2 platforms. Versa and Barracuda. We'll discuss some of the reasons why we have 2 platforms, and we'll discuss as far as the differences and how we can better serve your customers with those solutions. All right, so the agenda will be a quick, as far as who is Nitel. Does everybody here know who Nitel is or have sold Nitel? Okay, so we'll go through real quick. We'll discuss our SD-WAN offerings, Versa and Barracuda, some of the differences that the partnerships and offerings, case studies, and then we'll discuss what we've learned with the 2 years we've been implementing SD-WAN. All right, so first question is, who is Nitel? Seems like everybody here already knows who Nitel is, but basically, the Nitel team, what we're looking to do is simplify the complex technology that's out there for your customers and creating an integrated and tailored managed network solutions that will give them the freedom to focus on their business, right? So we are looking to manage their wide area network, their managed security services, so that all they have to worry about is what they do for their business. All right, I don't know why that looks like that. All right, well, the map is, I don't know why it's screwed up like that, but the graphics isn't showing up correctly. All right, I'll talk through it. As far as Nitel we do have our own network where it's spread throughout 7 core POPs. I apologize for that. I don't know why the graphics not showing up correctly. But we do have the 7 core POPs: Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas, Denver, Los Angeles, New York, and Seattle, where we can provide MPLS services, internet services, Ethernet layer 2 services. We do have the ability to also offer off-net or resell of our partner networks, such as internet access, broadband services, things like that. So we can provide an on-net solution, meaning directly provided by Nitel, or in the case of diversity, where you may have a client that requires 2 different carriers, we can provide an on-net Nitel solution as well as an off-net, possibly a partner carrier of ours, but it's all supported by Nitel and it's billed through Nitel. So that's where we can provide diversity options. So when should I quote you? Right now, SD-WAN is hot, right? Everybody has heard of SD-WAN. Everybody's asking about it, whether it's to replace their existing MPLS network or to augment it. Multi-site WANs, MPLS, Ethernet layer 2 networks, any kind of transport anywhere. We have partnerships with Viasat to provide satellite internet, as well as we can also provide fixed wireless solutions, as well as, we've already discussed the ability to provide MPLS circuits and internet circuits, dedicated internet circuits, whether it's fiber or copper-based services. Challenging reach, anywhere where you're finding difficulties finding access. Managed security services, that's a new service that Nitel is providing. So that would entail SIM-type services, intrusion testing, as well as incident response services. So that's a fairly new service. We just launched that earlier this year. And if you have any customers that are experiencing big carrier fatigue, right, when dealing with AT&T, Verizon, CenturyLink, Windstream, You know, a lot of those types of customers, they're looking for somebody to actually give them a more boutique approach as far as customer service is really the case. Because a lot of the services we sell, it's a commodity, right? Internet is internet. But where we can make a difference is that boutique style of customer service. All right, so actually, let me take a step back. Any questions on Nitel? Everybody pretty familiar? All right, so this slide actually is showing you the devices that we would use for SD-WAN. Actually, let me take a step back here. Is everybody here familiar with SD-WAN? Have you guys been selling SD-WAN? Are your customers asking about SD-WAN? Okay. And is that basically to augment or replace their existing wide area networks?
A lot of them, they're asking just if they want to have that automatic to be able to load balance and just to get a better network.
High availability SD-WAN without dropping an IP packet, like a voice packet, which we're finding that most SD-WAN providers say that they can do it, and they can't really do it.
Okay.
Unless you pay for the high availability.
Yeah, I mean, I would see that as one of the built-in features of SD-WAN, right? That would be a typical. Okay. All right, so this is a graphic of the two types of SD-WAN platforms that we have. The one at the top is our Versa CPE. With Versa CPE, our typical edge equipment will have 4 WAN interfaces and 1 LAN. And the 4 WAN interfaces, basically that can be, you could connect a variety of different access circuits in there, whether it's dedicated internet, you know, maybe fiber-based, broadband services, wireless 4G, fixed wireless, whatever type of access circuit, even MPLS. You know, can be a combination of those 4 WAN interfaces. The one towards the bottom left, that is our Barracuda platform, which is similar. It has multiple WAN interfaces. Typically, you know, you would have, for SD-WAN to make sense, you would typically have more than one access circuit, right, to provide that failover from one circuit to the other, or be able to use both circuits at the same time. Now, as far as that table, and I don't know why it's doing this. This is actually supposed to be different slides, so I apologize for that. But the slide over, or the table on the right, is just kind of showing the differences as between the actual platforms that we use. And part of the reason why we went with these two platforms was basically to be able to better reach or meet the different requirements that our customers have, right? The main differences between the two platforms are that with the Versa platform, we're able to offer a web portal where the customer can log in and view all of their bandwidth utilization, SD-WAN utilization, as well as security features, right? So the analytics for those two types. Whereas with the Barracuda, there is no single platform, or there is no single portal that can provide both the security as well as the SD-WAN utilization. We can provide, for the Barracuda, we can provide access to a application that the user can install on their desktop to view the firewall analytics, but the actual SD-WAN analytics or the bandwidth utilization will have to come from our SolarWinds platform. So that's one of the main differences. So if your customer had a requirement where they wanted to be able to view the analytics off of a single portal, then Versa would be the platform. Now we don't we're not requiring you to actually, know these differences or make the decision for your customers. What we're going to do is we're going to talk to you and your customers, figure out what their requirements are when it comes to SD-WAN. What are they looking for the actual SD-WAN to do, as well as the security requirements and their budget, right? So that's why we have these two platforms, as well as we're continually looking at other SD-WAN platforms, which we may add to our list of options. Some of the other factors as to what we look for in SD-WAN platforms is we wanted to make the networks less complex, right? With some of the other platforms out there, they don't have built-in security. They basically, if somebody needs security, they would actually need to have a separate firewall, right? You'd have an SD-WAN CP and a separate firewall. Whereas, with these two platforms that we are using, the security is actually built in. So it has the SD-WAN feature sets as well as the security feature sets all on the same box. Now, as far as the SD-WAN security features, a typical SD-WAN feature set will include the ability to fail over between one circuit to another. Somebody mentioned that as things that their customers are looking for, right? So that should be inherent in the SD-WAN feature set. The ability to traffic shape applications between circuits. The ability to actually provide packet duplication. So you can send your packets over both circuits at the same time. So those are the things that are inherent in these two platforms. All right, so we all understand that SD-WAN basically is transformed the way we look at selling WANs for our customers with respect to management, with security and cost points that differ greatly from MPLS. The typical thinking is that internet circuits are generally less expensive than MPLS circuits, right? And it's having an SD-WAN network would be would give you more scalability, as far as it typically will take less time to actually install a broadband connection versus MPLS circuit, which may take anywhere from 90 to 120 days. All right, so some of the key features of SD-WAN, being able to use multiple active circuits, all connecting to a single CPE device, right? The automatic circuit failover, the application load balancing and steering, traffic steering, and the prioritization of critical applications, right? That's some of the things that these customers may have, maybe using on their MPLS network, we can do with SD-WAN. Some of the myths of SD-WAN. SD-WAN improves the performance of internet circuits. It may, but again, the thing to understand is that if you have an internet circuit that is not very reliable, that goes down a lot, SD-WAN really is not going to make it more reliable, right? SD-WAN, typically what SD-WAN can do is provide the application prioritization versus these best effort connections. But if you have a bad internet connection that keeps going down, SD-WAN isn't going to make it better. What SD-WAN will allow you to do, though, is if you have a second internet circuit there, it can then provide the failover to that second circuit. Question? So the question was recommending, or if we recommend the use of coax along with 4G wireless. Based off of our implementations, we could recommend the 4G wireless typically as a failover only. We don't recommend using that as a primary. The broadband, our typical implementation would be the broadband as obviously the primary. Typically you would get, you know, faster speeds off of that, right? And the 4G as really only as a failover. And a lot of times it depends on that 4G service also, because there could be a data allowance that's tied to that 4G, right? Typically, if we were going to use 4G, we typically recommend an unlimited plan for that. But it is a viable use of it as far as, you know, as a failover. We don't really recommend using it as a primary circuit, especially if you have a customer that's using voice over IP.
But you could do like an active-active scenario, assuming the 4G does have unlimited.
Technically, you can. It is possible. With SD-WAN, a lot of things that you could do is basically you could force, let's say, your important corporate traffic over the broadband, and maybe your less important traffic out through the 4G. SD-WAN will cut your network cost in half. Now, it's possible that, you know, the company will save money by implementing SD-WAN, but, you know, that's not guaranteed, because what you have to also remember is that typically with an SD-WAN, you're having to integrate another circuit at least, right? So instead of just this one MPLS circuit, now you're putting in probably a dedicated internet circuit, possibly with the broadband, and then the SD-WAN CPE. But you have to weigh that against the benefits, right? So now they have failover, now they have additional bandwidth. SD-WAN is simple to set up and maintain. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. It's really going to depend on how complex the customer's network is. We typically recommend that there is a long discussion as to how the customer actually is going to use their network, what applications are they running. You know, this would be done with talks with their IT people, what security policies they have, and then also what's the plan as far as migrating from their existing network over to the SD-WAN. So it's really typically not a plug-and-play type thing. There has to be a lot of pre-planning. SD-WAN is an MPLS killer. It could be, you know, SD-WAN can be used to actually replace existing MPLS network, but we usually, you know, we never go in stating that, hey, we're going to replace your MPLS network. We first have to listen to the customer to see what their actual requirements are, what their needs are, you know, where and what's best for the customer. It could be that a hybrid network may be best for them, because you know, maybe they've got they're running voice over IP or some sort of ERP system that has specific latency requirements, right? So it may be best for them to keep their MPLS network, but then use the SD-WAN to augment the bandwidth needs, right? Or maybe they're incorporating more cloud applications, right? So we can then use the actual dedicated internet connections at each of those locations for their cloud applications, and the MPLS for some of their internal applications that have to make calls to their data center, right? So it really depends on the customer as to whether, you know, they can get rid of their MPLS network. Because remember, the MPLS still will give them circuit SLAs as well as performance guarantees. And I apologize again, the graphic is not showing up properly on here, but some of the security feature sets that are built into our SD-WAN platforms, here's a table basically showing you that you know, both the Barracuda and the Versa platforms can offer URL filtering, application control. So these are your typical next-gen firewall feature sets, right? That could be found in your Cisco firewalls, your Palo Altos, things like that. So they're all available with both of these feature sets or these platforms. Some of the typical ones that we'll run into that are required by customers: the web content filtering, the IPS/IDS, network antivirus, and anti-malware. There is a difference between the two, and this is why we basically have to listen to the customer's requirements before we actually can recommend a platform for them. Is that, for example, the Versa platform does not currently have remote user VPN clients, right? So if you have a customer that has, let's say, salespeople that travel and that have to have access to the corporate network, typically they'll use some sort of remote client VPN software to actually get back in. Well, Versa does not offer that, so the better option there may be Barracuda. Now, that's not saying that we can't use Versa. What we would end up having to do is probably implement a VPN concentrator for those remote users in addition to the Versa SD-WAN network. The Versa platform also currently does not offer sandboxing, or some firewall providers will call that zero-day protection, whereas the Barracuda has that option. So again, it's one of those things where we have to fully understand their security requirements in order to give them the platform that best suits their needs. Any questions? Now, I also did mention that one of the things that we will listen to also is, what's their budget, right? So there are differences between the two platforms, and part of the reason why we brought in the Barracuda was also from a budget perspective, right? So this is just kind of a snapshot of the customer site requirements being, they were looking for SD-WAN, they were looking for next-gen firewall feature sets with unified threat management. Unified threat management typically means IPS/IDS, web content filtering. And they're gonna have 100 megs of aggregate bandwidth at this location. And what I mean by that is we actually base our pricing and our hardware off of the actual aggregate download speeds at that location. So if they've got a 50 meg dedicated internet connection and a 50 meg by 10 meg broadband connection, or what I mean by that is 50 megs down, 10 megs up, all we care about is the download speeds. We don't really care about the upload speeds, right? So the 50 plus 50 equals 100. That's how we would actually price out the services. So in this example, you'll see here on the Barracuda side, this typical box would be $169 a month. The UTM add-on is $29 and a total of $198. Whereas on the Versa platform, our pricing, as we have to add in the security features, does go up a bit. So there is a difference in price. Any questions? Now, this is an image, or this is a screenshot of the Versa portal. Like I mentioned earlier, Versa does have a really nice web portal that we can give the customer access to, where they can actually go and actually look up their analytics themselves. So this is what we call the dashboard on the Versa portal, where it'll show them high level as to the bandwidths that actually being used for each of their locations. It'll give them the site map of where all of their locations are. So each of those dots represents an actual SD-WAN CPE somewhere in the United States. Here's another screenshot, basically, of the Versa platform showing them the availability of these circuits. So this is actually good analytics for them, so that they can tell whether some of their circuits have been going up and down. So if they notice that they're losing bandwidth, they can look at this and see that if it's all green, then that's good. That means that location has not had any kind of outages. But if you see some red in there, that means the circuit's been down for however long a period. Now, if you guys are interested in more thorough overview of the Versa platform, we can schedule an on-site or an actual web demo for you guys, where we can kind of log in and then kind of show you via WebEx. Again, some other screenshots of some of the data that you can actually generate. Like this one basically shows you, the types of applications that, at least for this location, the users have been going to. Obviously, if you see something here where, let's say like YouTube is a majority of the traffic, then you may be okay with that, or you may want to actually either stop that traffic, or you may want to make sure that that type of traffic is not going over your, let's say, more expensive dedicated internet connection. You may want to, if you're going to allow for it, you may want to force that traffic through the less expensive broadband connection, right? So that's the power of SD-WAN. More screenshots. This screenshot is actually off of the Barracuda application, that if a customer does want to see some analytics, we can give them access to this application where they can log in and actually get the firewall analytics. It's not as good as the Versa portal for showing the actual bandwidth utilization. So if a customer wants to see their bandwidth utilization, they have an option of either manually requesting reports from Nitel, or we have another portal which is SolarWinds, which we can give them access to, so they can actually look up their bandwidth utilization reports. It would be a second portal. It wouldn't be the same, but they will have access to it. So that's a difference between the Barracuda and the Versa, where Versa, there's a single platform that can show the bandwidth utilization as well as the firewall analytics, whereas with the Barracuda application will show the firewall analytics, but we would have to provide a second portal to view the bandwidth utilization. Another screenshot of the Barracuda application. Some target customers. So what opportunities and customers do we look for? When is SD-WAN a great fit, and when is SD-WAN not a good fit? We'll talk about some use cases. A use case as far as where a customer has some bandwidth constraints, a use case for application prioritization, and a use case for circuit failure. All right, so this use case is basically where the customer has some bandwidth constraints. So what we're, and here they've got an MPLS network as well as a public internet connection, right? So this is where we're looking to provide the benefits of SD-WAN, which is the full utilization of the multiple active circuits, the prioritization of critical applications, and the intelligent real-time application traffic routing. So in this is the example where let's say if that MPLS circuit becomes congested, then we can then route the video conference traffic or the voice over IP traffic over that public internet, right? So the priority for these important corporate traffic is going to be the MPLS network, right? But should that circuit be congested, or should it go down, that traffic can automatically then start going out through the internet connection. And remember, since there are SD-WAN CPEs at both of these locations, the branch office and the data center or the corporate location here, there are SD-WAN tunnels that are connecting those locations, right? So any traffic between those locations, the branch office and the data center, is going to be encrypted via those SD-WAN tunnels. And then over those SD-WAN tunnels, we can provide the prioritization, the QoS, for the applications that the customer wants us to actually prioritize. Any questions on that? And so the second case study is the application prioritization. Again, similar type thing as far as you've got your branch office, you've got your data center. We have the voice routed over the dedicated internet connection. And then in order to save bandwidth off of that dedicated internet connection, we're going to route Facebook or any other non-critical application, Facebook, YouTube, we're going to route that over the less expensive broadband connection, right? So that is another typical use of SD-WAN. Now, and also remember, we do have firewall services here. Maybe we could also make it so that maybe the customer does not want to allow for Facebook or does not want to allow for YouTube traffic. Well, we can stop that here also at these CPE devices. Or we could also make it so that maybe only the marketing people can actually access Facebook and the rest of the company can't. We can get that granular with the firewall services of both of these platforms. Any questions? And then circuit failover. So this is another typical reason why a customer would want an SD-WAN solution. Basically, in this example, you've got an MPLS circuit and you've got internet circuit at the branch offices and the data center. Well, we can make it so that if the MPLS circuit fails, then all traffic instantaneously fails over to the internet circuit, right? So again, because there's SD-WAN CPEs at both of the locations, basically that's all that traffic is encrypted going over the SD-WAN tunnels. Any questions? Am I missing any case studies or scenarios that you guys have run into or that you guys want to talk about? All right, some qualifying questions to ask. To what extent is the customer concerned about outages, at their branches, at their host site, or at their DR sites? What happens when those circuits go down? Do they lose money? Or is it not that big a deal to them? Typically now that, especially if customers are out on the cloud now, it's pretty important. That was a question?
Yeah, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
A customer has a POS, say it's a supermarket, they're running a POS system, and that is going through, they have Comcast and AT&T. They don't have fiber, just have the coax and regular DSL for AT&T. He's having the problem that when they run the POS, sometimes the internet goes down, and they double charge customers, and they're doing a lot of that. They're having that issue. Would SD-WAN would be a good solution for this customer? For that, let's say when they're running that POS system, that's what I'm thinking. Would they be able to pick whoever has the best bandwidth at the time?
Yeah, it's definitely possible. Again, there's different ways to get around that issue. So you said that there are two access circuits at the location, right? So it could be as far as the circuit failover, automatic circuit failover could be an option there. And typically the circuit failover is fairly fast. A lot of times, users don't even notice. Right, so we're talking seconds. Now, another possible way to get around that also is as long as the remote location or the retail store, and there has to be an SD-WAN appliance or instance at the POS location. I don't know if that's cloud-based or if that's at their data center. As long as there's SD-WAN tunnels between those locations, we could also run packet duplication, so that packets are actually going out both connections. So you should really never lose a packet then, in theory. So that's another way to actually get around that. Another question?
So, do you guys manage? So what happens when, say your primary goes down and your backup kicks in? But do you guys open up a trouble ticket with the carrier as you're managing the circuits, or?
That's a great question. So it depends on who's actually providing that circuit, right? So with our SD-WAN service, we don't require that the actual access circuits actually be sold by Nitel, right? It's in everybody's best interest, right? Because then you guys make money. But that's not a requirement. So if Nitel is actually providing the dedicated internet, the broadband, whatever the access circuit is, then Nitel is going to be responsible for the actual support of those circuits, right? So we see that it goes down because we are monitoring the SD-WAN equipment. We see that it goes down. Automatic ticket will get generated. The customer will get notified saying, hey, we lost connectivity to this network. Please confirm that it's not planned. That there's power there. And then once we get confirmation, we'll start working that ticket, right? If it's customer provided, then we can provide notification that it's down, but then the customer will need to be responsible for then calling whoever that third-party provider is for support. Now, if that third-party internet connection is connecting into our SD-WAN, we do offer a service, and it's $50 per internet connection, where if they'll sign off on Nitel, usually it's some sort of LOA, being able to provide support for that circuit. As long as it's an internet circuit, it's $50 a month. We will take over the support of that circuit, right? Not the billing, just the support. Another question? Oh, sorry, I thought that was a question. Does that answer your question? Okay. So we have done that for a lot of customers that are looking basically for a fully managed network, even though maybe for some of the locations they've got contracts on these circuits, so they have to keep them. Another question is, do you use broadband or wireless to back up your MPLS or internet at your branch locations? Backup circuits can be expensive, especially if it's dedicated. And a lot of times, those circuits are basically just idly sitting there, right? Because they're only used for failover. Well, what SD-WAN will allow them to do is actually use both of those circuits at the same time. When was the last time they tested and confirmed that their backup actually works? And what happens to your application if the primary circuit goes down, right? So that kind of goes with the extent of their outages. What happens when they have circuit outage, or at least when their primary circuit goes down? Is there a failover? What happens? Typically, an old scenario would have been, customer has, they can't be down, customer has 2 internet circuits. They may be running BGP between the 2 different internet providers. BGP is a routing protocol that allows you to use the same IP addresses for between 2 different internet providers, right? We typically call that multi-home. You're connected to more than one internet provider. And that's great, it does work. But the problem with BGP is that it typically takes a few minutes for that failover to actually work. Whereas with SD-WAN, it's pretty instantaneous. Any questions?
I might have missed this, but if you're getting all circuits through Nitel and doing the SD-WAN, is there an SLA?
Is there an SLA? There's going to be, there is a few different SLAs there. There's going to be an SLA on the dedicated internet connections, right? And then there's going to be a separate SLA for the SD-WAN. Any other questions? Okay. All right, so we do have, for any of your prospects that are concerned about, okay, I have this single CPE device that I'm running my SD-WAN, and now I'm using it as a firewall. They may have concerns, okay, what happens if that device actually dies? Now, now I can't get out to the internet, and I'm not protected. Well, we do have some high availability options. We can do active standby. Now, active standby is the only option for high availability with the Barracudas. So what that means is basically you would have one primary Barracuda CPE that would be used, and then if that fails, there's a second Barracuda box there. that can then take all the traffic. With Versa, we have active standby as well as active scenarios that we can support. So active meaning both Versa devices are being used at the same time. So those are options if you have a customer that is adamant about, you know, they just can't be down, so they have multiple circuits going in, but also, you know, redundant hardware. We do have that option. Now, why Nitel? I'll just go through these. We have the multiple platforms to fit the needs of your customer, right? We mentioned that we have the two platforms so that we could best meet the requirements, whatever those requirements are, both SD-WAN-wise, security-wise, and budget-wise. We also have the option to provide our managed SIM services via TrustWave. That's that new managed security service that I mentioned. We have a partnership with TrustWave, who is one of the top managed security providers in the world. We also offer dedicated SD-WAN engineers who will help design, implement, and support the SD-WAN network. So that's something, if a customer were to sign SD-WAN with us, we actually have a dedicated engineer that will actually help them through the technical requirements gathering, basically finding out, you know, what IP addresses they have, what applications are they running on their network, how do they want to prioritize those applications over the SD-WAN network, and then also the security, right? You know, what security policies they're going to need. So we have a dedicated SD-WAN engineer that will actually help them through that whole process, you know, from signing all the way to the actual activation. So we're not just going to, you know, send them a list of questions here, you know, fill this out. We're going to help them through that process. And, you know, we have a network that's built for SD-WAN. Like I mentioned, as far as, you know, we have the Nitel network. We could provide dedicated internet access through our network. We could provide it through our partner carriers. We can also provide broadband, DSL, fixed wireless, satellite internet, 4G wireless. So whatever type of access circuit is available or that, you know, is required, you know, whether the customer's looking for redundancy, right? They have a fiber-based circuit. Now, you know, if that fiber gets cut, they want to make sure they've got some sort of wireless backup capabilities, right, to fail over to. So we can provide all of that, all under a single bill, all under single support structure. Any questions? So we call that, you know, one back to Pat, right? What we've learned based off of our 2 years of the SD-WAN implementations, we always definitely want to have a separate conversation as far as voice and firewalls, and that's typically with the pre-sales, right? So that would be conversations with you as well as with the customer as to, you know, what are you guys using for voice? Do you plan on using your own firewall? So we may run into prospects where they're adamant about, you know, they don't want to use our firewall, they want to use their own. That's also possible, but, you know, we need to make sure that we understand that right away so that we can design for it.
And who's that conversation with?
Typically, you know, unless, if you guys know, typically that'll be with, you know, the customer's IT people.
No, from your end.
Oh, that would be you bring you would talk to the channel director, and then they'll bring me in or one of our other sales engineers. We'll help you determine those, you know, the requirements.
Who's the most knowledgeable Nitel asset with SD-WAN?
Most knowledgeable,
Yeah.
pre-sales wise. I mean, I would say I'm pretty knowledgeable.
Well, it's important because it's probably the biggest technology that every single carrier is doing wrong. So
Yeah.
I'm interested. I want to set up a conference call with you and
Yep.
two customers that couldn't get installed by another carrier because, you know, things were promised. So are you that person?
Yeah, I would be that person.
Okay.
Yep. I'll give you my card.
He has to be engaged on every and single SD-WAN complex application from the very beginning. He's the one who's going to design it. Your channel manager is going to basically be the quarterback to find out the pricing
Yep.
of that solution.
Okay.
You draw out the map, you draw out the design. He is the backbone behind it.
Yeah. And if it's something that I don't know for sure, then, you know, like I said, we have those dedicated SD-WAN engineers. You know, I can bring them on board too. Okay. Now, what we've also found is, you know, if at all possible, we want to take over control of the firewall as part of the SD-WAN appliance, right? That just makes things easier, less finger pointing, as far as, you know, well, having issues with this traffic. Well, if we have full control over everything, then it's just easier for us to be able to troubleshoot, as opposed to having to then go to the customer's IT staff saying, well, we're seeing everything working okay SD-WAN wise, you need to look at your firewall. But again, you know, if the customer's adamant about it, maybe they're using an MSP for their security services, we can make it work. 4G, we definitely recommend, I think I mentioned this earlier, that, you know, you go unlimited data plan if possible. Third-party MPLS and bring your own BYOB is bring your own bandwidth, so that's the third-party internet circuits. We basically learned how to implement, you know, third-party MPLS onto our SD-WAN, as well as, you know, the bring your own bandwidth type access circuits. And then activations, we've learned from all the various activations, we've learned it's best for us to actually have two phases into an SD-WAN implementation. One phase is we first make sure that the access circuits are all working, right? So typically that would be, especially if we are implementing new or installing new internet circuits, right? We're first going to test those internet circuits to make sure they're up and running, and then we'll schedule a second phase or a second activation for the SD-WAN. Once we know the internet circuits are working, then we can then implement the SD-WAN and know for sure that we're not going to have issues with the circuits. Any questions? That's pretty much it. Thank you.